Yes, thank you for joining us for another episode of Family Case Files. I am your host, V, and today we actually have a special guest with us. I say special because he's not just a guest, but he's also a member of the staff, Family Case Files, co-media director, and the what they say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and the closest ones to us obviously get hurt first. And yes, I have the wonderful and most dangerous internet blogger, Joanne Dennison, with us, who is a legal professional, and she is going to help us with Melvin's situation. So let's start with you, Melvin. I just want to know, no disrespect to you, but the standpoint, and I will explain this for the audience, the standpoint from which I do my interview is from the standpoint of the audience, because I want to make this sort of an interactive feeling to it, because I don't do live shows. So I don't research my guests as far as what they're going to talk about and their specific cases. I want to have that critical thought process that the audience should be having. And we all lost critical thought, with public education and all that stuff. No one's able to think critically anymore. I want to bring that back. I want to bring that back into style. Okay. And so please go ahead and tell us what you're going through.
Well, my history with the Department of Children and Families in Massachusetts, it's been almost 6 years now. And my first son was born in April of 2013. He was born in Boston Medical Center, I'm sorry. And when his mother went into labor and was about to deliver the baby, the hospital staff confused her with her twin sister, who had previously had a child at the same hospital, and the child had been injured. So they started to treat my son's mother in a very negative way. They didn't want to give her any medications or assist her during the labor, which I thought was unusual. You think that a hospital's primary function would be to care for the patients, but they seem to just really just ignore what she was going through. I mean, when my son was actually coming out, I was standing there holding her. They had her flat out on a table and she was going through the delivery. None of the hospital staff assisted her during the labor, and when my son's head finally came out and I just started getting all excited and telling them, he's coming out, that's when the doctor came over, and he kind of unbelievably, just like roughly just pulled my son from her womb. He was quiet and sedate. He was, a normal baby. He was just relaxed and not going through any sort of changes. But the hospital staff told me that they wanted to take him and measure his feet and his hands for like identification purposes, and they would be back in a few minutes. So I accompanied the nurse with my son while they were taking him to have that procedure done. And they told me that they were going to keep him for 3 or 4 hours. And I just was perplexed as to why they had suddenly changed, what they were telling me. So I told them that at that point I didn't really want him treated there, because the way that they had treated his mother and the fact that the hospital staff was acting kind of strangely. There was a poster on the wall that said it was the hospital's patient's bill of rights, that said any patient can have can be transferred to another hospital via ambulance if that was their request. So I asked them to, we were in Boston, I asked them to transfer my son to Worcester, Massachusetts to the hospital via ambulance because I wasn't satisfied with the treatment that his mother or him were receiving in the hospital. At that point, they started saying that I was denying him treatment, and they suddenly became very, I'm not going to say aggressive, but they just, their whole attitude changed. I've never seen hospital staff
Well, if I can interject here, I want to go ahead and say that, you know, you're absolutely right. The hospital's first duty is obviously treatment, but even so, it's the treatment and records. Being a hospital, your records aren't right, and you're not going by your records. This one's identity, that's going to cost lives. Could potentially cost lives. And I want to go ahead and touch on this other part here where you stated that, you know, your rights to going to another hospital and then the denying of treatment. They basically want to deny you that right and discharge you. Is that right, Joanne?
There's a lot of interesting things going on here. I don't have the medical records, and so it makes it a little bit harder for me to figure out what's going on. There are some red flags that I'm noting, and one of those is that, from what I've seen, if something had gone wrong or if there was an issue, the hospital will try to cover it up. You said that they pulled the baby from your wife even though he was crowning and about to be born. Did they use forceps?
No, they did not. She wasn't even in stirrups or anything. They had her flat out on a gurney. And
that's very weird. Yeah.
It really is. Like I said, when we went in, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but when we went into the hospital, they assumed that she was someone else. They didn't believe that she was who she said that she was. And it was just almost a bizarre type situation. But when they actually figured it out and finally got her record from the computer, my son's mother has had 5 previous children taken from her by the Department of Children and Families in Massachusetts. I know that sounds very bad. It does sound bad. So the hospital staff.
It sounds sad. Very sad.
It is. She's had a real hard upbringing, and you know, she was on her own since she was 17 years old. And I mean, when you first meet a person, you know, they're not going to come to you and say, "I've had 5 children taken." You know, it's something that might come out after, you know, a while in the course of a relationship. But I never thought that because of what had happened in her past, that would affect my present when my son was born. So the fact that she had a previous history with the Department of Children and Families, the hospital made a decision at that point that they were going to have this son of mine taken into custody also because of her previous involvement with the Department of Children and Families. So that was the cause for some of their abrasive treatment. That's why I wanted my son transferred to the hospital in Worcester, Massachusetts, because, I mean, I've never seen hospital staff act in that manner. So when they finally got her medical record straightened out and figured out that she actually was who she said she was, and they noticed that she had had previous children taken, they immediately, well, they didn't immediately call the DCF people. The head doctor on staff that evening, she came into the room. We had been there about approximately 5 hours. And she says that, why don't you want your son treated? Because I didn't want the hospital to touch him or do anything to him, because one thing that I hadn't mentioned was that when they wanted to take him and put him in a closed room, it was like glass with a lock and everything, and they had 4 other babies there in warmers, and they pushed him on the side there, like they were going to, you know, I guess test the babies or something. And they said it would be like a long process, 3 or 4 hours. I said, no, I don't want that done. I want him transferred to the hospital in Worcester because of how they had treated her initially, how my son had been delivered. So when I asked for the supervisor to come and signed a paper saying that I didn't want my son to have any medical treatment, as the nurse was rolling him out of that room, the doctor, who was very angry that the fact that she wasn't going to keep my son, she suddenly reached into the warmer and almost like jabbed my son with something. He hadn't cried since he had been born, but he started screaming, turned beet red, and I was like, oh my God, this hospital is a nightmare. So, but the head doctor came in there and talked to me, and she asked me what was going on, and I explained it to her, everything that I just told you now, how my son had been born, how they had treated me, and I wanted him transferred to another hospital. She says, you know, you seem like a reasonable individual. You know, I'm a disabled veteran. I worked for 20 years in the Postal Service. I'm a former New York City corrections officer. I worked at Rikers Island for 3 years. You know, I went to college for pre-med, and then, I mean, I am not, you know, someone that is unintelligent or hasn't actually, you know,
well, I can say you're not. I should call you sir. You're not someone who's a criminal or unintelligent, as you said. You're not someone to be. If you've had government equipment trusted to you, you know, in your hands, you can handle a child, your own child. Okay, that goes without saying. In this scenario, as far as these people are concerned, GI government issue is worth more, 100 times more than your child. So the fact that you were questioned or treated badly goes to show you that anybody with an agenda or anybody not intelligent enough to handle records, anybody who doesn't want to honor the laws can victimize you. It doesn't matter who you are.
No, sir, I'm not.
Well, what happened after that? So you talked to the doctor,
yes.
You asked for a transfer, and your wife was obviously postpartum, delivered the placenta, and she's stable, so
yes,
you could have left the hospital.
Well, the head doctor on staff that evening, she talked to me for about an hour and a half. She said, you know, I'm just going to let you sign your son out and take him home. So we went to the front.
Fine.
Yes, so we went to the front desk to sign him out, but there was a nurse who was actually the acting hospital administrator, and he was a nurse. He overruled what the doctor had said that we were going to do, because he was the acting hospital administrator, and he called DCF into the hospital at that point. Then hospital security came, and it was like 4 guys. They put me in a small room and kept me isolated from my son and his mother. They kept until DCF had arrived. And then DCF came in. Now, they hadn't tested my son. They hadn't, because I refused any medical treatment or anything like that. And DCF immediately took custody of my son the day he was born. Okay? It was in Boston. We were devastated. We left the hospital that evening. She was hysterical. I had to practically carry her to the car. I had never been treated so criminally in my life. It was just unbelievable. It was like a nightmare.
Well, it sounds like a baby snatching. Actually, they should have gone before a judge and gotten a warrant. Okay, so I don't know what happened with your case after that. Or when did this all happen? Your son was born in 2013, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
All right, and then you went through the procedure where DCFS tried to take your child away from you permanently, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I went through 3 years of visits with my son. I would see him 2 hours every 2 weeks. And then they had me going through parenting classes and they wanted me to immediately sign releases to give them access to my medical records and my military medical records. I'm a disabled veteran, so I go to the VA hospital.
Mhm.
So when I worked in the U.S. Postal Service for 20 years, and I was injured in a work-related accident. I had a half-ton freight door came down on top of my head and compressed my vertebrae. So I had 3 discs in my neck and 4 in my lower back. And I was prescribed Percocets and muscle relaxers. And at the time, they also had me taking fentanyl patches. I was almost paralyzed. I almost broke my neck. And I took a disability retirement from the post office. So the medications that I was being prescribed for pain, I had been taking those for about 4 years. So when DCF wanted access to my medical records, and I gave them a limited release to allow them to know when I was going for my treatment, what kind of medications that I was receiving, and basically the prognosis of my doctor, but none of the private conversations between myself and my doctor, I didn't give them access to any of that. For almost a year and a half, they, because they put it in my service plan that I had to give them complete access to my medical records. And I just said that, you have the HIPAA laws, and that's confidential information, and I just refused to do it. So they kept finding me not in compliance because I wouldn't give them access to my medical records. One thing that I had left out was that even though at the time I was 55 years old, and I had no intentions of starting a family and having a son and doing all of that all over again, I have 2 beautiful daughters who I raised, Tiffany and Chennai, and both of my daughters have graduated from 4-year universities. They're both doing well. My youngest daughter is an accountant. My oldest daughter is a supervisor for a insurance company. Neither one of them have any children. My oldest daughter is 34, and her sister is 32. And they're both doing well. I raised my daughter myself, my oldest daughter, from 11 years old, here in my home. I live in Worcester, Massachusetts, in Tatnick Square, one of the best neighborhoods in the city.
And I want to talk about the fact that, number one, the hospital couldn't hold you in a room. They're not allowed to do that. The best thing to do, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, is to say, am I free to leave? And if they don't say that you're free to leave and let you leave, now you've got a false arrest. So for people that are in your situation, the hospital cannot direct you in a room, make you stay in a room. They can't separate you from your child because they have no rights to that, but they do it all the time. And then on top of that, you have the right to leave that hospital. And as you know, many, many women have given birth in the fields, gotten up and gone home. There's no reason to worry about that. And of course, you can always take the baby and the mother to the doctor, their regular doctors, the next day and have them checked out. That's not an issue. I do believe that, I don't know if you pursued this, you may have had a malpractice suit because that's not the way that your wife should have been treated. You don't give birth on a gurney in the hallway if there are LDRs or labor delivery rooms available. She had the right to that level of treatment. So I don't know if you contacted a lawyer about filing a medical malpractice suit, but that should have been done. In Illinois, it's a 2-year statute of limitations. I don't know what it is in Massachusetts, and you definitely should have looked into that. And it wouldn't be to make money on it, but it would be to make a point, okay?
Yes,
that no matter who the woman is, black, white, rich, poor, suspect, not suspect, obviously all the doctors and the nurses should have been brought to task on this. She had the right to an LDR. She had the right to a comfortable assisted delivery. And the other thing you can do, even at this point, obviously the federal government, Medicare, Medicaid, government insurance paid for that birth. Go report it to hhs.gov as fraud. They should not have been paid a dime for that. That's ridiculous. And I'm sure once we get into the case, I don't have your records yet, but I hope in the future when we do more of these shows, because we're just starting, I could have gotten the medical records and had some of my assistants look them over. I do have some doctors and nurses on staff with me, volunteers, and we could have given you more insight as to what your rights were. I really am sorry. And certainly he had the right, once the baby was delivered and she was okay and the baby was okay, they had the right to refuse further treatment and say, this is her obstetrician's name, like they care about her. This is the baby's pediatrician. I'm going to take the baby to a doctor's appointment tomorrow, and most pediatricians will see you right away with a newborn baby. Because I've had 4, so I know that you have a checkup right away after you leave the hospital, and then 1 week later is typical, and then maybe 2 weeks later. And then after that, it's once a month, okay? You have the right to refuse shots. You have the right to refuse any kind of extraneous things that they want to do. You just say, I'm going to take my child right to the doctor. They cannot hold you in a room and say you can't go. The best thing to do with the police or security guards or anybody like that is to say, and record it, of course, right? Record everything, all interactions, and say, I would like to go. Do I have the right to leave? And you keep on repeating it. You don't talk to them about anything else. You said that you refused to give DCFS certain records. That's your right to do that. They have the right to go to court and try and convince a judge that they can get a court order for those records, and you ask the judge for time to file a response. Now, the problem we've had in these proceedings, not to get too far off track, is the attorney you will get in these proceedings appears to be working for the state more than they are working to protect your rights. So maybe we can move along and you can tell me a little bit about that. What happened with your attorney in the child removal proceeding?
Well, my attorney was incompetent. When we went to trial for custody of my son, he was approximately 3.5 years old. And I had been going through the DCF process. It's so trying and it's mentally debilitating. What they have you do, they have you follow a service plan that they create, and based on their own assumptions of what may or may not be your problems or quirks or whatever it is, they make you go through different agencies to, in their opinion, address it. Because I ran a residential shelter. And when you're dealing with indigent individuals, you're going to have like a lot of police calls, domestic, and because it was like the individuals that live there. So because of the fact that I owned the property and there was a domestic issue there on more than one occasion, DCF decided that I had to take a batterers program as part of my service plan. That program was a 40-week program that they wanted me to do 2 hours every week for 40 weeks. In addition to that,
I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous. Just for you owning a homeless shelter.
yes,
That to me seems like punishment to you from the system. Call me conspiracy theorist. If anybody doesn't know who I am B, from Radical Hardcore.
Well, my question is, why didn't his attorney fight that in court when it happened? Why didn't his attorney do anything?
well, the attorney actually doesn't come into play until you're actually going through the trial phase.
No, we got some real problems here, and you may be looking at a legal malpractice case. And the reason for that is that DCFS doesn't need your medical records or anything like that. Make the judge get it, all right? If your attorney's handing it over, that may be legal malpractice. And this nonsense about I run a homeless shelter, and because I run a homeless shelter, I have to take DV training because you're a property owner, that's insane too. That should have been, your attorney should have filed a motion to quash that.
Okay, but the thing here is, okay, for avoidance, and I have to look at, because this is a TV show and we have to get through the issues, but there are the legal issues that exist. We also have to look at what can we consider for the issues. What, I mean, there are the whole thing of, yes, we can legally do this, these are patient rights, but as soon as you try to exercise those rights, you become non-compliant. Now, what are the, how, I don't know any of the legal process here, how can they say that you're non-compliant to exercising your right? How do they even look on paper?
Well, because, V, it's up to the court, the judge, to keep all of this under control. So when they issue an order or the court says, oh yeah, that's non-compliant, like, nobody cares. It's really up to the judge, and it's up to the attorney to argue, this is a patient right. It should not be considered during these proceedings. DCFS, there was no warrant served on this guy. Why wasn't that case dismissed immediately? He didn't have a warrant, so because there's no warrant, they can't take away the kid. The kid has to be returned right away, and he had the right to file for, false removal, violation of civil rights in federal court. But his attorney didn't do anything, so I think he's looking at massive malpractice at this point against his attorney. He might have a breach of fiduciary duty case against DCFS, and we are making inroads with that. And certainly these people who are licensed professionals should not be engaging in this behavior, okay? They shouldn't be saying because you wanted to move your child after they were cleared or go to a private doctor, that's ridiculous, since everybody used to be born at home 100 years ago. There were no doctors. Doctors didn't do that. It was like your husband would go out and deliver the cow and he'd help you with the birth at home. Nobody cared, right? So how is this all occurring? And obviously, at the conspiracy end, there's human trafficking, they're taking the kids away, they're putting them into slavery, which we just had. There was another case I didn't put on my blog because my blog doesn't really concerned with that, but there was a case where they found 133 children in Texas. They recovered them, they found them, and they were in slavery, cleaning homes and offices, and sexual slavery. So I think that, not to get to the conspiracy end, but we're seeing these cases pop up as well. They should in the media. So that's how I think you lost your kid, is A, not knowing your rights, not running to an attorney right away and saying, hey, they took my kid yesterday. I need you to run into court and get my kid back. That should have been your first call, is to your private attorney. And the private attorney should have threatened the crap out of DCFS. Because the people who do that, people that have money, people that hire the attorney, they get their kid back. Because once they're sucked into the system, getting out of that system is like a legal nightmare. And even though those people act like they're your friends, they're not. They are your worst demon enemy, okay? I think the statistics are 99% of the time, if you don't get that kid back right away and threaten somebody, you're going to lose a kid. Isn't that what you've heard on the stats?
Perfectly good advice, but I want to break some of the mental blocks of the people who are watching. Now, you say run to an attorney. I know when people are victimized, they know they should run to an attorney. I know the first thing that comes up to mind is, oh my God, I can't afford an attorney. Or, oh my God, I can't afford, a legal battle, period. So, I mean, what is some advice in that situation? Can you help break that mental block a little bit?
Well, you're going to have to call around and email around. There are law clinics. There are local clinics that protect the poor. You can go to the court. Clerk of court generally has a list of all the people that are doing pro bono legal services, and then get on the internet, make that Facebook page, find everybody you can, and find out what they're doing in the same situation. One of the things you can do is, I'm telling you right now, you got a horrible, corrupt judge. He's probably in on it, and the first thing to do is get all those people together in your area, Boston, Massachusetts, wherever you are, and remove that judge. Because that judge is a kingpin for corruption, and I have had success in removing judges, these corrupt judges, and it's done through blogs and posting. And one of the things we did, this is a funny story, I had somebody who was wrongfully arrested. I don't know if you were, I apologize, but when I found him, this is one of our other friends, I think you know who he is. I was able to get the fax numbers for every single judge in Colorado, and I faxed them. I stayed up all night, and I sent out 150 faxes. Now, what crazy person put those up there? I don't know. I'm sure they're gone, but I actually have all of the fax numbers for the judges in Colorado, and he did get released. He didn't do anything. He's a targeted individual, but there are ways also to fight this, and that's why I'm doing this show. This is why V is doing this show, so we can get the word out there. When you get sucked into the system, it's not a good system. These people aren't your friends. And I know you're going to feel like, I can't afford an attorney, I can't get an attorney, how am I going to fight this? But you're going to have to get your friends together. Now, I have had some people, they're getting together and they're filing petitions for a supervisory order with the Supreme Courts. You know, that a bunch of people getting together, putting in $200, $300, $400, 10 grand to write a brief with a regular attorney saying, you're violating your rights. Don't do this anymore. I know on YouTube, there's an attorney, McMillan. He's working out of the Southwest. I saw his video on like Ninth Circuit law. You can't take away anybody's kid without a warrant. The U.S. Supreme Court has said you can't do this. There are things you can do, but it does start with doing your legal research, making a noise, getting on Facebook, and getting together with parents and removing these judges. These are horrible, horrible judges. They don't belong on the bench. And yes, I've gotten rid of plenty of them. And I've had judges actually change their minds about court procedure. Why? Because they're being watched. Also, you're entitled to the juvenile court proceedings, the pleadings. So if you didn't get a copy from the attorney, I don't know, we didn't get into, did you get a copy of all of your pleadings from the clerk of court and from your attorney?
Yes, I did.
All right, good. You need to scan those in or mail them to me, and I will get them up there. That's the first step in showing everybody the corruption in your case. Did you get a copy of all the transcripts? So, you know, when you go to court, there's a court reporter there, right? Just type it away.
Yes.
So every time you went to court, you should have a transcript. You got all those, right?
Yes, ma'am. I have everything.
Good.
And
all right. Then you should get something that's called a record on appeal. That was on your appeal.
I have that.
All right. Did that attorney prepare an appellate brief?
No, the attorney that actually represented me during the trial phase, like I said, she was very incompetent. But the attorney who worked on the appeal, he was very diligent in his attempt to have the original judge's decision overturned. Thankfully, the judge who made that decision in family court, Judge Leary, he's finally retiring.
Oh, thank God. Let's all have a moment of silence there. Oh, yeah. My God. Get rid of him.
He's had, but he's biased against families or individuals, parents, anyone who has any issue that deals with alcohol or substance abuse. He already has his mind preset that child is going to be placed into the system. From what I understand, he had a family member who died from a drug overdose. The judge did.
Sad, yeah.
Yes, it is sad. And so anyone who came before him with a issue with alcohol or substance abuse, he already had it preset in his mind that these people were going to lose their children. I contacted the U.S. Department of Justice. I wrote them a letter, Justice Department, Civil Rights Division, telling them that I felt my civil rights were being violated, that they wrongfully took my son. And I have the letter there. I'll scan that and send that to you. Their response to me, they said they carefully reviewed the case and they didn't find any civil rights violation because I asserted that my civil rights were being violated because they were insisting to have my medical records. And I think I made the wrong pleading on that. But they did transfer my case. The Department of Justice transferred it to the Department of Health and Human Services. I have a letter from them. I'll also scan that and send that to you. And because I was asserting that the behavior of a hospital in which my son was born was inappropriate. And hospitals should not be in the business of trying to help the Department of CPS, Child Protective Services. CPS. Hospitals should not be in the business of helping Child Protective Services take people's children. But from what I understand, that when if a hospital staff member somehow reports a child and DCF becomes involved, there seems to be some sort of bonus or some monetary reward given to the hospital staff for each child that they help place with DCF. I also made a complaint to the Office of the Attorney General in Massachusetts, claiming that, yes, I wrote them a letter also saying that it was wrong for what they had done, taking my son. You know, I've served my country for 4 years. I don't have any criminal convictions. I raised 2 daughters. I own 2 properties. Just because the mother may have had some issues in the past, that is no reason for them, because they've taken children from her previously, to take my son. But That's
correct. That is absolutely correct. Now, the question is, once I get all the records from you, I can take a look at the case again. But I think you're looking at a breach of fiduciary duty. You're looking at 42 U.S.C. 1983, which is deprivation of civil rights under color of authority. You need to report the hospital. Get the financial records. This is how you can really make a dent. Report the hospital. They shouldn't have gotten paid a dime for your wife's birth. And I'm sure they charged insurance, the government, whatever, some $7,000 to $10,000 for what, 24 hours of torture? That's Medicare, Medicaid fraud right there, hhs.gov, all right? So there's a lot of things you can do on this. I'm really, really sorry this happened to you. This is not your fault. This is not the way the system should be. And if the judge had a problem, he should be retired with drugs or alcohol, and he cannot make an unbiased decision. He shouldn't be sitting on the bench. He shouldn't be sitting on your case. And if your lawyer knew that and didn't tell you about it, the lawyer should have said, look, Your Honor, with all due respect, we can see you got a problem here, and for that reason, we want you to recuse yourself. The judge has to make an unbiased decision. If there's some kind of pattern, or if there's some kind of problem the judge has in his personal life, her personal life, that judge should be recusing themselves. They shouldn't be sitting on the bench. And it should go to, I don't know, did you file a complaint with the Judiciary Disciplinary Board? That should go there too.
No. Hold on. Before you go, Melvin, let me just go ahead and interject here. My personal thoughts here. As a public official,
Member of the public.
You want to say public official, but I say public servant. And when you are public, things need to be known about you. There's also the duality of private citizen, but when you take the bench and are control of the public citizens' lives, there are things that need to be known about you. These judges' lives, I think personally, it just may be the responsibility of, I don't know, anonymous hackers or whoever, reporters, journalists, to give us more transparency on these judges, because they operate too much in the dark, for one, and they have absolute impunity. And
well, they don't have absolute immunity, so don't be saying that.
No, I said impunity, but even if it's not on paper, that's how they act. But I want to ask you, Joanne, as far as the medical records, and there are situations I've been through in life, it's like, okay, we can't do anything without your medical records, or we can't do this without your medical records. As far as being attacked by the courts, whether family or criminal or whatever, I mean, what are the situations where you absolutely do not have to give up your medical records?
No, you don't. You don't. In fact, if they want it, they better come up with a good reason to tell the judge to issue an order for your medical records. And then your attorney should argue, this guy hasn't done anything wrong. He's an upstanding member of society. He served his country. There's no reason to divulge private medical records to DCFS, because once they get over there, now anybody can FOIA them, or Freedom of Information Act, okay? So there's a lot of arguments your attorney can make for you, okay? And this attorney didn't do his job. He should be sued for malpractice. And and here's the other thing, V, take a look at this. Who appointed that attorney? The judge did. The judge has got a bias. The judge is taking away 95% of kids from poor families, right? somebody that can't afford their own attorney. It's all a corrupt, screwed up, integrated system. And somewhere down the road, that judge is getting some kickbacks, which I know, you know, they do it through the property records. Somebody takes out a loan, another person pays it back. Mr. Owens, I don't know if you have looked at that, but there are other ways that judges can get kickbacks for this. Because once you get nefarious persons and criminals into the system, and I know probably V, you learned a lot. I had to learn a lot about the criminal mind because we don't have that. And Mr. You for sure, you're so sweet and adorable. You have no idea what these people are doing. You have to learn about it. You have to find out from other people because these people are just the dirt and the scum of society. They're the bottom of the cesspool. That's who you're dealing with. So it's hard for you to get a handle, the average, good, nice citizen, unsuspecting, to get a handle on what horrible these people are. You know, we don't think that way. We never think that somebody wants to come and rip our babies out of our arms within 2 hours of them being born. Who would do that? What kind of a monster does that? Nobody. And certainly your wife deserved another chance. And you for sure deserved a complete clean slate. I don't see, this is going to be the worst father's rights violation I've ever seen. And I do have another case like yours, by the way. The mother did something and they have no proof of it because they only tested for metabolites of drugs. They didn't test for the actual drugs. So I don't see how they can take anything away from those parents, but they took his son away from him right in the hospital. He wanted to get the car, take his son home, and they had swiped the baby. No warrant, no court proceeding. He had to call DCFS to get the first court date, which wasn't for a week. How disgusting is that? They're not supposed to do that unless there's a true emergency. In other words, somebody ready to stab the baby or whatever. These babies are in the hospital, and they take them away without a warrant. I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic, and I'm on my soapbox. But I just wanted to assure you that this is terrible, and it has to end. Right, B? It's terrible.
Absolutely. And Melvin, once we have more of paperwork and stuff like that, we are going to dive deeper into your case. I still want to welcome you on board of being a co-media director of Family Courts Files.
Thank you, sir.
Glad to have you. It's an honor. It really is. I am so angry for what you've been through. For once, I gotta just move on to the next thing here. So angry. I want to let everyone know, please. Joanna Dennison, most dangerous blogger on the internet.
Now you know why.
This woman has been, okay, you guys asked me to produce a saint, and I found one, okay?
I'm not a saint.
I found one, despite what she says. That's just the modesty of a saint speaking there. She is not in courtrooms fighting because of the corruption that she's exposing. She makes her living from helping genuine victims, and she, okay, let me step back and say she makes her living from donations because she is at the level and capacity to help genuine victims. Most time don't have any money. Now, you guys know me. I don't ask you for a dime. Never have. This show's gonna run if I gotta chew the ass off the government itself. This show's gonna run. Any of my shows are gonna run. I don't ask for a dime. But Joanne Dennison is a lady who works out of the goodness and kindness of her heart. The links will be put in the show here now. If I haven't already made a commercial, please donate, because we are spearheading the family court system and exposing all corruption. This is the campaign. This is it. It's not going to get any better than this. Whether it's CPS or DHS, or, whether it's probate court, anything having to deal with family issues, this is where it's at. We're putting our blood, sweat, and tears into this. This is our heart. Please follow us. Please support the show, share the show, donate to Miss Joanne Tennyson, and let's get something going. Let's get this movement going. We got the Yellow Vest movement. I think we can have a movement for our children and our elderly, can't we?
Absolutely, I agree. Your show is vital in bringing out, shining a light on the dark practices of these child protective service agencies. The way they take these children for the Title IV entitlement, they get paid by the federal government from the Social Security Trust Fund, each child they take.
Yep.
Once they took her previous children and they just automatically assumed that because she had another one, they were going to take that child also. And that was my first son that they took. He's been in the system now. He'll be 6 in April. But what I hadn't mentioned earlier is that after my son had been taken into the system and he had been adopted, I had a second son with the same woman.
Mm-hmm.
And he is currently a year and a half now. He was born at another hospital in Worcester. And because they had taken her 6th child, and now this was her 7th, we were there in the hospital for 5 days with the baby in the room. And everything was fine. We were caring for the baby properly, and they gave us a sheet to write down the color of his feces to see if it turned from yellow to brown or whatever. We were supposed to keep a record. Yes.
I don't want to break your heart, but the show's only an hour long, so we'll get you for another episode.
Okay. Second show we'll talk about my second.
We'll start the next episode with the second child. The second son.
Has it been an hour already? Wow, this went by fast. I really enjoyed our conversation.
That's just the way it goes. Melvin, you've gone through these horrendous things, and you being a staff member, a key member of the show here, I do know that we have not covered all your issues, and we're going to get all the decisive paperwork here in the future to where we need to get it, and with Joanne, and to have things dissected, because we got to have things dissected, and we got to look at the letter of the law. We know that you've been violated earnestly thus far, but we got to look at this with a microscope, and we'll have you on again for the episode. Was there anything that you wanted to say before we end it off?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I think your show is excellent with the concept that you're presenting, and that there are thousands of victims like me across America. These child protective service agencies, no one's child is safe. I mean, a simple phone call from a disgruntled employee to DCF stating that your child has been abused will automatically send them to your home and have them initiate an investigation. And they take people's children like at a whim. And this must stop, because the families are the basic unit of this country. This country was founded by families out in the wilderness. Finally, they started villages and small towns, became cities and states. Families is the core value of our country. And the fact that this agency is disrupting families, this must stop. It is wrong. And future generations of Americans will look back upon this DCF dilemma just like they look back on the issue of slavery. And even though it was legal at the time when it was going on, generations now know that that was wrong and unjust. So I hope it doesn't take 200 years before people have to realize that what DCF is doing now is wrong, but it must stop. It's un-American, and it's unjust, and it's unconstitutional. 500,000 children are in DCF custody right now in America, but most people are concerned about 1,600 immigrant children that were separated from their families. That seems to be the spotlight for most people's attention. But we have 500,000 American children who are in the DCF system across this country, and the numbers are increasing every year.
They are increasing, sir. They are increasing.
More children.
for being on the show. And Joanna Denson, thank you for being legal advisor for this episode. And please catch us next time for Family Case Files. This is the Truthtainment TV network, okay? We're still with TLBTV, but subscribe to our YouTube channel as we are branching off to create a wonderful media and do some activism. We need justice in this world. So please subscribe, hit that notification button, and catch us next time. Thank you.